Leaves are falling and autumn is calling. Welcome everyone to another exciting episode of Everything Zen, where we discuss everything in the Zenescope universe, from grim tales of terror to Monster Planet, Oz, Belle, and so much more. This is Zenescope. I'm your host, Mark Sells, and we're so glad to have you along with us for our September edition of Everything Zen. Henry David Thoreau once wrote, "Happily, we bask in this warm September sun, which illuminates all creatures." Fall is poetic, and there are so many great things to help you bask in that September sun, from sweater weather to the start of football season, great television premieres, pumpkin spice lattes, and maybe some well-deserved quiet time with the kids back in school. Did you know that out of the 12 months of the year, September contains the most letters? Not only does it have the most letters at 9, but it's also the 9th month. No other month has that claim to fame. The September harvest moon is the fullest moon of the year, so if you look into the sky, you can't miss it. It's so large and bright, it gives off light all throughout the night. And in mid-September every year, the Chinese celebrate it under the Moon Festival, one of their most popular holidays during the year. In addition to the harvest moon, September is also known as Harvest Month. Some of the best crops of red apples, raspberries, and tomatoes can be found. The first day of fall, or the autumn equinox, if you like, occurs on September 22nd this year. And did you know that it's the one day of the year where the hours in the day are almost identical to the hours in the night? There are more classic and pop songs with September in the title than any other month. Earth, Wind, and Fire, of course, but also songs by Tony Bennett, Frank Sinatra, Fiona Apple, Neil Diamond, The Bangles, Van Morrison, and Green Day's Wake Me Up When September Ends. And speaking of music, the Beatles recorded their first single, Love Me Do, on September 11th, 1962. More historical days in September include George Eastman patenting the first roll of film under the name Kodak on September 4th, 1888. The U.S. Post Office was officially formed on September 24th, 1789. The popular auction site eBay, well, it was founded on September 3rd, 1995, and just 3 years later, on September 7th, Google emerged. The very first Monday Night Football game was played on September 21st, 1970, between the Cleveland Browns and the New York Jets, with Cleveland winning 31-21. And with the fall TV lineup, it's no surprise that many noteworthy series made their debuts in September. Shows like Lost in Space, Miami Vice, Battlestar Galactica, Knight Rider, Gilligan's Island, Xena Warrior Princess, and let's not forget, Star Trek, the original series, aired its very first episode on September 8th, 1966. Famous September birthdays include Keanu Reeves, Zendaya, Beyonce, Michael Keaton, Idris Elba, Jason Sudeikis, Salma Hayek, Bill Murray, and legendary horror author Stephen King, whose birthday falls on September 21st. Also, there's some podcast host celebrating a birthday in September. I wonder who that could be. Coming up on this month's podcast, we're continuing our dark streak by putting the spotlight on Baba Yaga. Noah's got some Baba Yaga prizes to share with you in a little bit, and we'll be joined by Zenescope president and co-founder Joe Brusha to learn more about the past, present, and future of the one they call Miss Malice. Later on, we'll be joined by Crozet, an incredible synth rock band from Zenescope's backyard of Philadelphia, whose latest album, Suburbia, is a fantastic blend of epic 80s nostalgia. That's the hottest single, Summer Nights, off the 8-track album Suburbia by Crozet. Available on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, and all digital platforms right now. Here in September, those summer nights may be coming to a close for now, but we're still waxing nostalgia at Zenescope as we look back at some witchy origins. We've got some wool of bat, eye of newt, and enough exotic goodies to get the cauldron boiling. September edition of Everything Zen starts right now. For this edition of Everything Zen, our folklore and fairy tales move away from German and French origins to those of Slavic tradition, which includes the Indo-European language family of Russian, Ukrainian, Polish, Czech, Bulgarian, Croatian, and many more. Specifically, we are talking about Baba Yaga, one of the most memorable and distinctive figures in Eastern European folklore. A supernatural being who often appears as a deformed and ferocious-looking woman who stands on chicken legs and, like many witch types, resides in a dark dwelling deep inside the forest. Baba Yaga is a bit of a mystery in terms of etymology. While the word Baba generally means old woman or grandmother, there is no consensus on Yaga. It can be interpreted as serpent, disease, horror, abuser, or evil being. So it makes sense that when you combine the two, you get a witch-like character. Baba Yaga made her first appearance in 1755 in Mikhail Lomonosov's Russian Grammar, with bony legs, iron teeth, and a long nose like a bird's beak stretching out over a hot stove. She flies around in a mortar, wielding a pestle, and helping or hurting those that encounter her or seek her out. Now, if you're a fan of Netflix's The Witcher, you may recall the character Volith, the Deathless Mother, in Season 2. That character was based on Baba Yaga. Hellboy also included Baba Yaga as a child-eating witch both in comic form and the 2019 film. For all you John Wick fans out there, the name should be very familiar, as Keanu Reeves' character is often referred to by his enemies as Baba Yaga, a name synonymous with boogeyman. Moving into the Zenescope universe, Baba Yaga made her first appearance in Grimm Fairy Tales Volume 1, issue number 42, as an enemy of Seela Mathers, the keeper of the book. And much like her historical origin, she is portrayed mostly with an evil nature, but occasionally a force for good. Baba's mother, Fel Yaga, was one of the keepers of the Journals of Mist, who was killed in front of Baba by the Dark One. So vengeance was on her mind at a very early age. She was also a star pupil of Shang's until he discovered that she was a spy for the enemy, so he cast her out and imprisoned her in a house in the forest where she lay in wait, casting traps for humans, eating them, and using their bones to create a fence. This month, in the latest edition of Robin Hood, Baba Yaga has a secret mission, making a surprise return to the Big Apple where she has a run-in with our favorite archer. It's the beginning of a multi-story, multi-series arc that involves H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu creature, a gigantic entity depicted as a cross between a dragon and a green octopus. To find out more about Baba Yaga, her plans and ties to Cthulhu, her powers, artistic creation, and her Zenescope initiation, we'll be joined by co-founder and president Joe Brusha. But before we bring Joe into the mix, let's check in with Noah to see what prizes you could win if you enter our September Podcast Word of the Month contest.
Oh, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. It's time once again for everybody's favorite podcast segment, the Zenescope Word of the Month contest. Offering fantastic prizes to a few lucky listeners. Anybody can enter and anyone can win. To play, all you have to do is listen for this sound. When you hear it, We'll reveal this month's secret word or phrase. Email us at info@zenescope.com with that secret word or phrase, and you'll automatically be entered into our raffle. One first place winner will be randomly selected to receive a collectible retro lunchbox featuring our character of the month, the Baba Yaga.
The Baba Yaga!
The Baba Yaga! This comes with a set of 3 metal cards, plus the latest issue of Robin Hood, where she tackles the sinister spellcaster in an epic 32-page blowout. But that's not all, because 2 second-place winners will also be randomly selected to receive a copy of that new Robin Hood, plus the graphic novel Grim Fairy Tales: The Library, where a young Celia Mathers discovers for herself that the Baba Yaga can be quite the handful. As an added bonus, runner-ups will be chosen randomly as well to be given discount codes that can be used to purchase comics, art prints, and more, all located conveniently on our web store. Don't forget to send your entry to info@zenescope.com for your chances to win. But remember, only 1 submission per person. Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Noah. It's now time to dig deeper into the Baba Yaga saga. And for that, we're bringing back Zenescope president and co-founder, Joe Brusha. Joe is here to talk about the longevity of one of Zenescope's biggest villains of all time, outside of the Dark One. What does Baba Yaga want? How did she come into being? And why is she intent on giving the Keeper of the Book and other heroes so much trouble? We'll also scratch the surface on how she factors into the latest major storyline at Zenescope that begins this month with Robin Hood, Baba Yaga. Well, fall is closing in, and we are all cozy in the Creator's Corner with Zenescope president, Baba Brusha. Joe, welcome back to the show.
Thanks.
You know, I have to admit, as a fairly new Zenophile, when I first came across Baba Yaga, my initial thought was that it was some sort of take on Baby Yoda. Same number of syllables, I suppose. But obviously, Baba Yaga predates Baby Yoda by many, many years, appearing in Slavic tradition dating back to the late 17th century. What made her stand out to you, and how did you go about incorporating her into the Zenescope world?
So, yeah, she goes back pretty far. I think her first appearance was like in Grim Fairy Tales 15, 16, 17, somewhere in that range. So, she's been around a lot longer than Baby Yoda. So,
Yes.
I think that, again, it was one of those things where when Grim Fairy Tales started to evolve out of one-shots into more of a ongoing story arc and getting away from just all of the usual traditional fairy tales, we were looking for strong anchor characters, both villains and heroes. And, again, Baba Yaga is, like you mentioned, been around for so long. We just thought a cool reinvention of that character would be a great villain for the series. And that's really how she came into existence for our universe. I believe, and God, we're going back now probably 15 years. I think she had her own book maybe at one point, similar to what Celia and Sky had. But I know she was, tied right into the whole Grim Fairy Tales universe with kind of using the book as an angle. But I can't remember the exact details. It's been too long.
And she was in Bad Girls, I think, right?
Yeah, she was, once she made her first appearance, she appeared in several different titles, and she's, been in, reoccurring character all the way through and all kinds of standalone stories and in the Bad Girl series and Age of Darkness, I think she was in. So she's been a pretty prominent character. Probably our most prominent villain, other than the Dark One, who was killed a while back. So she's been probably the most consistent villain, I would say.
Well, and she's a sorceress of great power. What abilities and responsibilities did you give her?
Again, now you're going back. You're making me tax my memory, Mark. I mean, her abilities are, as you said, sorceress. She has the ability to create creatures and create energy blasts, kind of standard magic powers. I'm trying to think. In her current iteration, she's going to be part of our Cthulhu series come up. But originally, she was kind of the Dark One's henchman and just intent on making the Dark Horde the leaders of the Grim universe.
Yeah, and she's not a fan of the Dark One at all. She's been known as Miss Malice over the years. The Baba Yaga legend is somewhat ambiguous. Sometimes she's helping people, sometimes she's hindering passersby. For Zenescope, what motivates her? What are her goals in life?
Well, she's definitely power hungry. She's, when you say she didn't like the Dark One, or she didn't really want to follow him, I think her ambitions were always kind of to take over and kind of throw a coup on his leadership. In the old Slavic fairy tales, I believe she ate children. So,
Yeah.
She had her house that we've had in our series too. But she's really just been an agent of evil, trying to gain power and wreak havoc on the good guys.
You talk about eating children. Well, Hansel and Gretel, of course, comes from the Brothers Grimm, which is German lore, whereas Baba Yaga comes from Russian lore. Logic would dictate, as a child-eating witch, that she might fit in more in the Gretel storyline, but she first appeared in Grimm Fairy Tales, as you mentioned, as a tormentor to Seela Mathers and the bearer of the book. Did Gretel ever enter the conversation for Baba Yaga?
I think we've talked about that, and Baba Yaga's whereabouts and where she is in the universe have always been kind of kept under wraps. I just don't think they've had a chance to encounter each other, but now you're giving me some ideas for some stories. So
there you go.
I'll have to run it by Dave. But yeah, I don't think she ever came up. Gretel's been kind of more not so much in with the original characters, as we are kind of developing new witches and with different powers for her to fight.
Baba Yaga has a signature look. She's got those eyes. She has the skulls on the shoulder, the red outfit. I know this is going to go way back, but do you remember who's credited with the look of Baba Yaga, and how did those elements come together and have continued on with the character over the years from artist to artist?
Well, if I remember correctly, I think that we gave design ideas to Eric Basadula, EVAS, and he came up with the look, and we really just liked it so much that we kept it. One of the things we tried to give her a little bit of an alter ego with the Malice name, and so that she could kind of walk around in public and not be seen, not be, I guess, discovered, because she has those kind of clawed hands that are pretty identifiable. So, but yeah, I think it's there's not been much of a change to her look since its inception. It's been a really cool, popular look for her.
This month, Baba Yaga is not featured in Gretel, but she's featured in the latest Robin Hood. What is she up to this time? What can you tease us about the new release?
So, as I kind of mentioned earlier, we're starting this new Cthulhu tie-in to our Grimm universe, which I think is going to be really cool and interesting, and taking a lot of that Cthulhu mythos and kind of combining it with some of the Grimm fairy tales mythology. So Baba Yaga is going to play a key part in that, and in this story, she's kind of up to her old tricks, trying to gain power, and she's looking for an artifact, and that's how she encounters Robin. Without giving too much away, I think that's about all I'll say about it.
Can you tell us if there are going to be any ripples into other storylines?
Definitely. This is going to go across the whole Grimm universe, all of our ongoing and one-shot stories. This will be a big thing for 2023. So they're standalone stories, but they're definitely going to tie together. And like you said, there'll be some ripples falling out from this issue itself.
Harlequin and Poison Ivy have a unique bond and relationship. Will we ever see anything like that with Baba Yaga, maybe in the future working side by side with Carrie's?
I don't think with Carrie's, because even though they are in some ways similar, Carrie's tends to be more of a, I guess, anti-hero, and she's always looking, even though she does some crazy stuff and a little bit of might slide towards the evil spectrum. She still has good ambitions. I think Baba Yaga is the complete opposite. She just is looking for power and doesn't care who she has to hurt to get it, and doesn't really care how evil she has to be.
Lastly, I have to ask, and you mentioned there's going to be ripples into other storylines. Will Baba Yaga make an appearance in 2023?
Yeah, she'll definitely be in probably several stories, I would say. I know we have her planned for a couple different issues, so she's going to play a prominent part in this whole Cthulhu mythos storyline.
Excellent. Well, Joe, thanks so much for giving us the entire scoop on Baba Yaga. I'll let you get back to your cauldron and all the things you're conjuring up for fans this fall. Thanks, Joe.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
If you'd like to learn more about Baba Yaga, stop by Zenescope.com, and midway down the homepage, you'll see a section entitled Baba Yaga 101. She's tormented Sela and Sky Mathers from the very beginning and spanning many, many years in grim fairy tales, all before embarking on a new mission this year in the upcoming Robin Hood Baba Yaga single issue, available this month. Our podcast Word of the Month is here, and for September, as we jump headfirst into H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu storyline with Baba Yaga, it makes perfect sense that the podcast Word of the Month is Lovecraft. The creator and author of Cthulhu, the September podcast Word of the Month is Lovecraft. Moving forward now, let's take a look at some of the exciting events coming up on the Zenescope calendar for September 2022. New releases drop every Wednesday and are highlighted by Amber in the weekly NCW live stream every Wednesday afternoon. This month, it's only fitting that we kick things off with Robin Hood in the Big Apple and facing off against Baba Yaga and her latest quest. Vampires, werewolves, and more are summoned by scientists to save the world in the latest graphic novel release, Monster Planet. Belle continues her search for the Tartarus Gateway and has a deadly encounter with centaurs, while Liesel continues her search for an unknown creature and calls upon her friend, Dr. Julie Jekyll, for help. Meanwhile, Sky journeys to a small coastal New England village and uncovers a sinister plot concerning the disappearance of many young women and a brand new storyline for Grim Fairy Tales in Volume 2, Issue number 64. And we wrap up September with the conclusion of Man, Goat, and the Bunny Man, Green Eggs and Blam, number 3. One that asks the question, have Man, Goat, and the Bunny Man reached the end of their friendship, or will they become the dream team they once were? Blam number 3 drops on Wednesday, September 28th. The new metal comic, metal cards, and sticker set have all been released for September and are available for subscription on Zenescope.com, along with the new 2022 Collectors Club editions for board game cosplay and catch-em throughout the month. And Carla Cohen's Fantasy Friday series returns on Friday, September 16th. Our September featured artist of the month is Eric Basildua, aka Ebass. He has a sticker set and 6 new metal cards, regular and Z-rated. You can get all 3 new art prints of his for just $50 this month, starting on September 14th. And lastly, we're hosting a science fiction fantasy virtual con on Thursday and Friday, September 15th and 16th, hosted by Ralph, Jason, Noah, and Casey. Exclusives and packs you can't get anywhere else, plus lots of games and prizes and special guests. That's Thursday, September 15th from 6 to 8 p.m. and Friday, September 16th from 1 to 5 p.m., all times Eastern. Our featured guests this month are John Helmuth and Sean Lee, the incredible duo behind synthwave sensation Crozet, a music project that began back in college days in Philadelphia in 2010 as a means to explore and bring familiar sounds together from the music that the two loved and were inspired by growing up. Influences ranging from Def Leppard to Bryan Adams to John Hughes films. There's a whole lot to love in Crozet's music, full of depth, evocative lyrics, and top-notch production values, all of which gives it a very familiar and timeless quality. Crozet released their debut album, We'll Be Gone By Then, in 2013. And 5 years later, their sophomore album hit on all cylinders with so many memorable tracks like Running Time, Moment of Nostalgia, and Harbor. This month, they've taken it up a notch with their finest effort to date in Suburbia, 8 colorful tracks of nostalgic bliss, from Summer Nights to My Racing Heart, Got Your Number, and Where We Belong. Big cinematic sounds, collaborations and vocals, and reflective and relatable lyrics. I sat down with the 2 talented musicians to talk about their journey together, the importance of photography and visual aesthetics in music, VHS tapes and 80s movies, and of course, the collaborative process behind their terrific new album, Suburbia. Here's what John and Sean had to say. Today, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to our special guests, John and Sean, the incredible duo behind the electronic indie pop sensation, Crozet. Gentlemen, welcome to Everything Zen.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Now, before we get to Suburbia, your latest album, I'd like to ask each of you about your early beginnings, what life was like growing up and how you first connected with music.
Yeah, sure. I can go first. I started playing music at a super early age. It was just kind of like my parents were super, super into music. They always had stuff on, specifically my mom. She was always playing a lot of electronic stuff back in the day, late 80s, early 90s, electronic stuff, dance music, R&B, a lot of rock. And I got my first guitar when I was around 8 years old. And I'll be honest with you, I hated it. I hated playing guitar because they kind of start you out with an acoustic guitar. And I did not want to play acoustic guitar. I wanted to play electric guitar. And I think at that age, you're just still pretty early where you can't play with your friends at that age. So I despised taking lessons for a few years. And I had so many different teachers in such a short span of time that I couldn't really get a connection to like any of my teachers at that age. So after a few years, I ended up starting playing with a couple friends of mine. And we were just playing whatever the heck we listened to on the radio. Green Day, we were playing Blink-182, all that kind of stuff, just mostly pop punk stuff. And that kind of morphed into playing more punk stuff. And I feel like our area in South Jersey, Philly in the early 2000s was really heavy into like the hardcore scene. So Sean and I had mutual friends in that whole circle of Philly hardcore punk, all that kind of stuff. So after a few years of doing that kind of stuff, Sean and I were introduced by a friend of ours. His name is Joe Brusha, and we ended up kicking off like immediately. Like he and I were everything was in common. We wanted to play the same stuff. We did the same stuff. And I feel like our group of friends had a huge range of music that we listened to. We didn't just listen to what we played. Like it's hard to find that. It's finding friends that listen to all different types of music. And it's like, right. I don't want to be afraid of like pitching music, like certain bands to my friends and be like, oh, they're going to think this sucks. And that was the one thing, like Sean and I, we pitched each other music all the time, always sharing each other links to stuff. And we love all different types of stuff. And I feel like that's what helps Crozet write, is we pull inspiration from so many different sources. And I've always had music. I can't say I've stopped playing music since I started when I was around 8.
Did you also have an acoustic guitar when you were young, Sean?
No, I actually, my parents got me for Christmas. Santa Claus got me for Christmas one year when I was 10, a Fender Strat. That was my first guitar. Ooh. I asked for it. I didn't ask for that particular guitar. My parents went above and beyond, got me the Strat. And there was a guy around the corner from me, Johnny McFalls, his name was. And he was older. He was probably 10 years older than me, but he was a total shredder. I mean, like heavy metal shredder. And I looked up to the guy, and I remember him coming over to my house when I was a kid and sitting on my couch and saying, you know, this is what we do. And he had like this big Jackson King V. I was like, man, this is so cool. And and he wound up giving me a couple guitar lessons, probably for about a year. And again, like all like metal, Metallica, Pantera, Death, like we were super metal kids. I was a heavy metal connoisseur. And over the years, I kept playing, never stopped. I was like an obsessed kid with guitar. When I was like 14, I was in a band. Wound up starting to play drums. And I wound up playing drums in this band for like 7 years, while also writing guitar parts for it. So I was a kind of a main structure in the band. And then, so I really got my chops on drums over those 7 years. And then I was always constantly playing guitar. And that just kind of morphed into, again, like John had said, we had mutual friends in the hardcore scene. I had a hardcore band. He had a hardcore band. We wound up meshing together because we were kind of sick of playing like super heavy music, and we wanted to do something a little bit more experimental. Yeah. So we were in an indie rock band called Cityscapes. And that's kind of just what it was. We played with Cityscapes for years. That turned into another band called Basio. Basio turned into a bunch of other side projects. And I remember me and John having a conversation one day. I was like, dude, you know that band Telephone Tel Aviv? And he's like, yeah, they're great, man. And I was like, yeah, dude, I'm really into that. And that's kind of what set us up for the whole electronic music thing. We weren't really into the 80s thing at that point yet.
Right.
We grew up in that genre, and it was always very relevant in our lives, like, John Hughes movies, stuff like that. But we never thought about incorporating it at the time. And then, I don't know, man, something happened. Like, John started putting together some demos, and then we really got into this 80s feel and vibe, and then the aesthetic, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. And that's kind of where we ended up.
I read that it evolved out of a school project. Talk to me about the band's origin. Because when I think of Crozet, this is going to sound really bad, but I think of Crozet de Savoie, the French pasta. How did the name come about?
It sounds delicious. That's the first one for me. I haven't heard that before, I'll be honest. Yeah. So it wasn't my senior year of college. I'm going to say my sophomore year. We were tasked with creating an album cover for a fake band. And it was one of our first projects where we were trying to incorporate typography with photography or graphic design, like any type of, it could be completely abstract. It could be super literal. I feel like I always was drawn towards more literal stuff, but I ended up, I was given 3 links to different websites. And what you do is you go to those landing pages, and whatever is on that landing page that's going to be part of the project. So the first link was for the album cover image. The second link was for the name of the album, and the third link was the name of the band. And they were all just like Wikipedia links, and then the album image was just a Google image search. It doesn't necessarily fit the vibe of what we kind of go for now, but I didn't know how to even pronounce the word. Some people say Crozet, some people say Crozet, and the Wikipedia link took me to the landing page for Crozet that was the Crozet Islands.
They're in the Indian Ocean or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So I know that there's a town in Virginia called Crozet, Virginia, and I'm 99% sure they pronounce it Crozet. I don't know if the Crozet Islands are pronounced Crozet or if it's Crozet. But either way, I got that name, and I was like, it's kind of a cool name. I feel like it's more abstract than the ones that we were used to in our previous bands. And I was like, I definitely going to keep that in my back pocket in case we ever use it. And once we started playing or sharing demos of just random electronic stuff, like Sean was saying, inspired by like Telephone Tel Aviv and M83, that time period, I feel like Crozet kind of fit the bill for that. And I think it worked well. I always hear people pronounce it different ways, and I was like, oh wait,
my mom still calls it Crozet. Yeah.
I grew up in the 80s as well. I love 80s music and movies. And I'm a big fan of the synthwave, retro wave movement, like the Midnight, Time Cop, FM84. In fact, it's how I found you guys. And the minute I heard Harbor, that was it. It's been on my summer playlist ever since. And I was wondering what your inspiration was for that song, both lyrically and musically.
That track was actually a single.
It was the first started out for that album, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So we started out, we released that as a single, and then it ended up on our follow-up LP, Running Time. I'll be honest with you, man. I feel like we were just in the mode where it's like, dude, I just want to keep writing, but I feel like we need to not focus on another 10 or 12 song, batch of songs. Let's just release a single, like super upbeat summer song. Not something that's like a downer, like total. I don't want to do a bummer song. Just let's release a single. And I think at that time period, the Midnight was definitely blowing up. And I feel like that was a time period where people just started releasing singles instead of albums. And I'm not necessarily a fan of that, but I think just workload wise, it's like, let's just put a single out. And I wanted it to be an upbeat song. And the music video for that's on YouTube. It's the most over the top music video. It's by 80s Ladies Records. They did it's basically just like found footage of movies and stuff. And it's so fitting for that song. I love playing it live. We played it live at our last show, and a couple people, I guess they hadn't heard it. They're like, what was that song? At this point in the set, like that was a song called Harbor. Like, man, that was good. It was really good. But I love playing that song. It's definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah, that song didn't even start out like that. I remember when we were demoing that song, it sounded nothing like that. It was like a straight, like 4 on the floor, like dancey style song. There was no guitars in it. There's like this like synth part that's in the main verse of that song. And that's all we had, I think, at the time. And it was just like, that's, to get an idea, that's how we always did things. Like it'll start off as one thing, and then we'll get an idea in our heads. Like I remember at that time, particularly, we were listening to a lot of Def Leppard. I was all over Def Leppard.
Right.
And I think that's actually what wound up molding that song into what it became, because it sounded nothing like that when it started out. Nothing.
I forgot about the Def Leppard phase. Yeah, we go through phases where we'll just like be obsessed with a few bands that were big in whatever genre we listen to, and Def Leppard.
I bought all that dude's gear. Like I bought all the Rockman shit that Phil Collins used on that album, and that's actually what we used like for all of that album. Like all the clean tones on Running Time was like Phil Collins's rig, like crazy. You know what I mean? And I was chasing that sound the whole time, and Harbor was like, the culmination of all that sound, and where it was like, this is the base of the record, this is the songs we're going to use, and that kind of shaped the rest of that album, honestly.
Music isn't the only thing that triggers nostalgia. Photography and visual images can do that as well. And John, you mentioned, going to school. I love the photography and the artwork you used for Running Time, sort of that black and white BMX style. The sense of loneliness is pictured in Live at Gradwell House, and of course the colorful retro street vibe that you got going on in Suburbia.
Right.
How do you come up with all of these amazing images, and what did you want to convey through them?
When I first started out trying to think of the artwork for We'll Be Gone By Then, I didn't have an iPhone then. I had some Samsung flip phone, and I started taking pictures with it. This was probably 2009, 2010. I started taking photos with it with the intention of making them look like crap. And it was kind of before like the lo-fi image filters started catching on, and people can easily just hit the button and make their filter look old, at least on a phone. And my flip phone just took crappy photos. And I was in Wildwood, New Jersey, on the beach at it's called the Race of Gentlemen. It's a race where they have vintage motorcycles and cars race each other. It's like pre-World War II era cars and bikes that race. And I was walking back from the beach, and that roller coaster, it's called the Great White. It has been there forever. And it's so odd that you can walk right up to the edge of the roller coaster, and it's kind of just like right out on the sand there. And it's just like a regular chain link fence that you can just walk up to. And then the roller coaster's right there. And I was walking back towards the boardwalk, and I was just snapping photos with my phone. And I had a whole batch of photos from that summer that I just was obsessed with, just taking photos just of everyday things, street style photography. And once we started working on the first album, it was typical. We were in the middle of summer when we were working on it, and I had all those photos, and I always look through the batches of photos that I have before figuring out if I want to go take a specific photo for whatever I'm working on. So I was like, this image is weird in a way that like you don't know what you're looking at. Like you see it's a roller coaster, but you don't know why it's like on the beach. So I thought it was abstract enough to where like the if you just look at it like at a at first glance, you won't really know what you're looking at until you really start looking at it. And I thought it blended well with just the vibe of the first album, the tones of it, the colors. I thought it fit the emotion of the album. And after that, I kind of wanted to start shooting photography and an image specifically for the albums. And when Running Time came along, that was the first time I really started paying attention to the lyrics as a whole group of songs and making it work from beginning to end, as opposed to the first album, We'll Be Gone By Then. We would work on those songs so sporadically that I would work on lyrics whenever I had time. And it was just like, oh, we don't know what we're doing with these songs, but I'll just write to them. So Running Time is the first album that, if you want to call it like a concept album, at least lyrically, I wanted it to make sense from beginning to end. And thinking about it for a while, I figured, we should probably shoot something for this. And the photographer was actually one of my best friends. His name's Ben McMaster. He's a Philly photographer, and it was shot on medium format. And I actually have the image. Like you could blow that image up the size of a wall with the original negative. And I just really paid attention to what the lyrics were saying, whether it was from the beginning of the album, the middle of the album, to the end of the album, or trying to encompass the whole album. And both Running Time and Suburbia, the images came out of thinking about that and thinking about when you start listening to the song, the intro of the album, like what image would come to your head. And I kind of put myself in the listener's shoes when I'm thinking about things like that. And, Running Time and Suburbia, the images that's what I see in my head when I'm listening to the album. And I always feel like putting people on the album cover, it's easier for the listener to relate to those people, or at least put themselves in the shoes of the people on the album cover. But I'm on both the album covers. I'm on Running Time, and then Sean and I are on the Suburbia album cover. I was like, I don't know if we want to see our faces. I think it's always better to not see our face, unless it's like a headshot, like a Bryan Adams like headshot album cover. But yeah, try to keep it abstract.
That'll be next.
Yeah, we're gonna do that next. Just our faces with a marble background.
Let's talk about Suburbia. 8 tracks released this summer, and you talk about concept album. For me, it was this fulfilling, complete experience from start to finish, rather than an ad hoc collection of singles. What was the inspiration behind the album, and was there a particular theme you were going for, to bring all of the songs together?
Sean, you want to work on that?
Yeah, I don't think there was ever me personally. I can remember demoing probably 5 of those songs, sitting in my living room on my laptop, not even not even in a studio setup. I was literally in Ableton, and a couple ideas for songs. I'd program a drum beat. I'd make a synth thing, like a little synth riff. I'd send it to John. I don't know if it was ever themed per se, but they were all written around the same time, so they're all going to have that same feel for sure. And I feel like all the songs were definitely in the same spot, like every time. Like I would send it to John, he'd send it back, and we did things remote. That's kind of how we did a lot of when we demo remotely, and then once it's demoed, we'll final record together. But yeah,
was that just a signature from the pandemic, or is that just how you guys like to work?
That's always how we worked. I mean, it was convenient. We've always had a problem with being in other bands where it's hard to get 4 guys together. We were always in a 5-piece band. It's impossible to get 5 guys together, especially as we're getting older. Everybody has families and careers, and it's always become harder. So that was actually one of the original ideas me and John had when we started Crozet. Was it's just me and you. we were always available. Me and John have always been available. We were like the guys that like, we got to play. This is fun. We got to do this. We're playing. And nobody else was. But that being said, from day one, we always worked remotely. It would be me sending an idea to John sending an idea to me, bounce it back. And then eventually it would be like text message conversation, like, okay, I think this song's at the point now where we can go through and start polishing it. Like the structure's laid out, the parts are laid out, and we'd get 5 of those songs together. And then we'd meet up at my house. I built a studio in our house. That's where all the albums have been recorded, final recorded. And then we would just work on them, man. So I don't know if there was ever a theme to answer your question, but I think ultimately they were always written in batches. Like, they were always worked on within a 3-month period. We were always listening to the same music, me and John. I think, as a matter of fact, during that particular time, it was a lot of Bryan Adams. That's what
he's going to love this podcast, by the way.
Dude,
I'm going to call him.
We're sponsored by Bryan Adams. No.
No, actually, when we started working on that album, I guess just to preface this by saying, like, I don't write the lyrics until after the music's done. I've never been good at writing lyrics before any music. I'm just not that type. I need to, like, listen to the song. I need to listen to music to get, a feel out of it. And then I kind of put words to the feelings. But when we started demoing Suburbia, like Sean was saying, we were in during the pandemic, but we never really had to change our method of how we demo with each other, since we always, like you said, we just did it remotely. But we were going back and forth for quite a while, sharing just riffs and ideas. And it was the first time that Sean actually played drums live on the album, as opposed to us programming just like a drum kit. That's him he's playing every song on that, other than one, but every song has him actually performing drums. So we were kind of messing around with technical things at first, just trying to change things up, from our previous album. Once we had the batch of songs, in a folder on Dropbox, that's when I started listening to them. Like, all right, now I can start working on lyrics. Now I can start thinking of a theme and an idea and trying to make it consistent across the whole album. And I'll be honest with you, there was a lot going on, in my life and in the world at that time period when I was writing. And I had plenty of sources of inspiration to pull emotions from. And whether they were mine or someone that I know, or just by a general population, I wasn't short of ideas. So I ended up writing most of it. I feel like we wrote the lyrics in a really short amount of time, maybe just less than a month. I mean, the whole album, that is. And we recorded the songs, vocals, really quick, like just in a couple weeks. And I was fortunate enough to collaborate with her name's Beat Simkin. She reached out. I was
going to ask you about her.
Yep. And Beat reached out to us. It was like a cold call. She hit us up on Instagram and asked us if we'd be interested in collaborating on some level, whether it's a single, working on stuff of hers.
Just out of the blue.
Total out of the blue, through Instagram. And I'll be honest, we don't get really many direct messages on Instagram. Like, that's not like our most prominent platform, I guess, which sucks because I'm on it all day, just skimming through stuff. But she hit us up on Instagram.
For context, for our listeners out there, Beat Simkin is a world-renowned meditation guru,
right,
best-selling author, spiritual advisor, and of course, she's also a musician as well.
Yeah. You're right. So she hit us up because she hadn't worked on anything musically in a while. She grew up singing and playing music, and I think she even had a record deal with Sony when she was a teenager, I think. She hit us up and asked us if we'd be interested in collaborating, and we're like, yeah, sure. We've always wanted to have a female vocalist on one of our tracks, but we just never had the opportunity or even knew where to start with that. So we clicked it off right away. Super, super fun to work with her. She also is remote. Like, she's not on the East Coast, at least at that time period. I think she might have been in New York, and then she moved out west.
In Hamptons then, yeah.
Yeah, so we were showing her the songs, and we ended up showing her the one that we would love to have her on. And I think I probably have showed. I think I showed her some of the songs with my vocals demoed in there, so she can get an idea of what the rest of the album sounds like. And she sent us a bunch of tracks over, and after she sent them over to us, I started adding a lot of background vocals to her track. And I feel like even though she didn't write from my perspective of like the whole album, I think what she wrote still fit right in. And I feel like it's in a good spot of the album to where
Got Your Number is flawless. I mean, it's one of my favorite songs on the album.
That's awesome.
Fantastic.
I would love to play it live. I'm hoping that we can play it live with her at some point if she ever comes back out east, or maybe we go back out west or something. But yeah, it's one of the songs where I'm like, this would be a fun song to play live, and I'm sure she would love to have a band behind her. But hopefully we can at some point.
I got to segue into another collaboration because I played saxophone in high school, and in Moment of Nostalgia and My Racing Heart, you bring in Carl Cox, which really warms my heart. I mean, there's just something magical about a saxophone that's missing in a lot of today's music. How did that collaboration come about, and how did you decide we got to put some sax in this?
Yeah, definitely. Sean grew up with Carl's brother, but he can fill you in on that.
Yeah, so Carl's younger brother, Steve, I grew up with him. I'm actually getting ready to go out with him in about an hour to go out on a boat. So we're best friends. Yeah, I hang out with the guy all the time. His brother, Carl, has always been like a saxophone virtuoso. He's like the teacher at the high school, like the music instructor at the high school. He has all these they win awards for like the jazz competitions that they do in Boston every year. The dude's like, he's as legit of a musician I've ever seen out of anybody. And he just happens to be my best friend's older brother. So when we got the idea, me and John, again, I think we were listening to like a lot of like Billy Ocean, Beach Boys, like that vibe, Bruce Springsteen.
Clarence Clemens, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, like that whole vibe. And it just hit us one day. We're like, man, we got to have sax. We actually tried to fake the saxophone in Are You There? That's not a real saxophone. That's a synth. And that's kind of where it started.
Interesting.
And we were like, man, we can't nail this tone. It's like good, but it's not good. And then we asked Carl. I was like, I know this saxophone player. I'm not sure if we'll be into it. At the time, I think he was playing shows with like Dave Matthews Band or Jay-Z or something like that. Like, he's huge, And so I asked him, he's like, dude, I love that vibe. Let's do it. He's like, send it over, man. And I sent him the track, and I'm not kidding. An hour later, he sent me back like 4 cuts. And I was like, oh my God, dude is into it. And I showed him. He was like, this is perfect. So we wound up picking the cut that we liked, because he just gave, I just said, just riff on it, man. Here's 16 bars, riff on it. Yeah. And he sent it back to us, and he loved it, man. And again, I still see him all the time. I was just with him yesterday, actually. Our kids were bouncing around at a bounce house down the street. So I was talking to him then, and he's like, dude, that song on the new album, My Racing Heart, he's like, yo, that song is the jam. And I was like, and again, it was like, he's into it. So, and that's what he said. Anytime you guys have something, throw it my way. Like, I would love to put it on. He's an 80s kid as well. He's right in our age group. He grew up in that genre. Loves it. You were like, listen, like I remember for My Racing Heart, I was like, think Billy Ocean. And that's only words we said to him. That was it.
Did we show him Caribbean Dreams?
Yeah, that's what it was. I was like, that's the vibe. And then literally an hour later, he sent us back. He's like, what do you think about this? And I was like, perfect.
We're not going to think about My Racing Heart the same now.
No.
It's going to have Billy Ocean all over it.
That's it, dude.
Well, Suburbia was recently released on VHS, thanks to Lunch Meat VHS, and as an awesome collectible. What are some of your favorite movies from the 80s, and do you have any on VHS? Be honest.
Man, I used to have so many VHS tapes, and the last handful of years, it's one of those things that just gets thrown out. And now I'm like, I should have just kept them. I think I sent Sean a photo last night. Lunch Meat, we collaborated with them on the VHS tape, and I had to work on the visuals for the VHS. So when you play it, it's a movie that syncs up with, not necessarily a movie, more of like a montage of imagery, moving images that sync up with the songs. And I didn't have a VHS player for the longest time. I'm like, I was just working on it on my computer. So I finally got it set up last night where I can watch our album. And I sent Sean a photo of it. But it's awesome. But growing up, man, I watched everything. I'd be honest with you, I love 80s Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. Every Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, over the top, like just ridiculous, like Terminator 1. I go back and watch that all the time. It's so like messed up. Like I love watching 80s sci-fi stuff, and I think just on that platform of VHS, it makes it creepier. So I'm probably going to start searching for a handful of these old movies I used to watch on VHS just to have them and see what it's like. But yeah, that anything 80s, man. Like I love John Hughes movies, obviously. I love 80s sci-fi films, tons of comedy. But I feel like when I try to get inspiration for Crozet, I'm totally going into 80s sci-fi or horror genre. But yeah, I need to get more VHS tapes. Just more stuff. I need to just start buying and stacking.
Yeah, it looks like there's room behind you.
Yeah, seriously, I know our listeners might not realize we're actually on a Zoom call with video, so my office is completely empty right now. Like I just moved, like I don't even know what I'm doing in here, but I have the VHS set up over here and the little CRT TV, so I can watch it on there.
There you go.
Yeah,
Sean.
I do not have a VHS player nor any VHSs.
That's okay.
I had the Crozet VHS, but growing up, I mean, ones that pop out in my head was like Labyrinth, Dark Crystal, Legend. I liked all those like darker, like mystical 80s movies. Again, John Hughes movies. I mean, I feel like that's like the gold standard as far as like, hey, this is the 80s. This is the sound. But yeah, I liked a lot of like darker movies. Like John said, like horror movies, stuff like that. Like obviously like Friday the 13th, like, that sound, that feel. I mean, that's what I grew up on. I can remember sitting on the couch watching Freddy Krueger when I was like 7 years old, being scared out of my mind, and it stuck with me. And they're the movies that really stuck with me personally.
I'm a huge David Lynch fan too, and I didn't start watching David Lynch stuff until I was in college, where my artsy college friends were like, dude, you got to watch David Lynch stuff. I'm like, I've heard of him, but I never really watched any of his stuff, and I got knee deep into Twin Peaks world, and just coincidentally, once I started watching Twin Peaks, the couple seasons that were available to stream at that time, he announced he was doing another season.
Yep.
I'm like, this is killer. So, I've seen Fire Walk with Me a bunch of times, and just that whole mental state that his films are in, it's just like so weird, but beautiful at the same time. And I feel like there's just like an endless sorts of inspiration from watching anything David Lynch creates. And I go back to it a lot. I revisit Twin Peaks world a lot just to get ideas and just figure out maybe there's something I can pull from watching some of this that I can turn into, a song or something like that.
Do you guys find any inspiration in things like, more modern takes on like 80s stuff, like Stranger Things and Follows?
Totally. And I love Stranger Things. I thought that was so well done. I remember watching the first season when it first started kicking off. I'm like, these guys killed it. Like production, the casting, the audio, obviously, like the music was on point. It was just so well done, and I feel like they genuinely had a good time doing it. And I think that's what works so well. It's just they keep putting out awesome stuff, and I'm excited for the last I guess is it the last chapter, last volume of episodes they're going to release at some point. I'm super excited about it. But
Sean, when you were talking about being a metalhead growing up, I immediately thought about Master of Puppets, last season. So you had to be thrilled with that.
Oh yeah. Metallica was my number one growing up. I mean, that was like the first songs I learned. Ride the Lightning was my favorite album. Master of Puppets and Justice for All. Like, I was a huge Metallica guy. So yeah, when they played Metallica, I was like, this is awesome. Like right up my alley.
Excellent. Where do you see Crozet in 5 years?
That's a good question. I know production-wise, from just this latest album, we really enjoy being able to play the drums live instead of just program them, and I think it lends well to trying to transpose the songs into live songs. It's always hard. We used to play as like a DJ set where it's just Sean and I, and we just got bored playing that on stage. So that's when we incorporated our friend Matt Weber into the band, trying to learn all the songs and make them feel live. And once we started recording the demos for Suburbia, our setup for recording drums changed a little bit to where we can actually, Sean can just play live. So I want to keep that going, where it's more of like a rock oriented setup instead of programming things. And that's not to say that we won't have one-off songs or a couple songs on an album that utilize drum machines. That's never, I don't think that would ever go away, but it would be coordinated that with, live drums at the same time. And, we play live. The guitars are real, the bass guitar is real, all the synths are real, the drums are real. And I feel like I want to get more into collaborating with artists, trying to get some more vocalists to play with us. Just make it more of like a rock oriented band, but never lose that feel of Crozet and that state of mind when you listen to one of our albums.
Sean, did you have anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think John hit that one on the head. I mean, I kind of feel the exact same way. I don't know exactly where we're going as far as direction wise and stuff like that. But like John said, it's just I feel like the rock thing in general. I mean, I've heard people refer to us as like synth rock and stuff like that instead of like synth pop. And I definitely feel we're more on that line. Again, growing up as metalheads and in hardcore bands, I feel like we can't get away from that. And we've done the electronic stuff live. And for us personally, we've always been players. And it's boring live. Like, it's just boring. Like, you hit a button, you fiddle around, and it's just like, this sucks.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah, exactly. That sucks. So I definitely want to lean into more of the rock aspect. I mean, I demoed some stuff, and it was like, it's leaning, like, not to say we would ever use it, but the stuff I demoed is like more like prog rock, like, Genesis.
Yeah, I would say it's like a Genesis vibe. Yeah.
Yeah, Christopher Cross, Genesis. And like, it might not be a Crozet, but we got them in our back pocket if we ever wanted to use them. Like, we do that a lot. We'll stick a demo in the Dropbox, and it'll sit there for 5 years, and then we'll go back and be like, man, that song was cool. Maybe we should do something with that.
Release them as singles. I mean,
I know.
That's what's happening. You don't always have to wait for an album.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
And I mean, that sounds amazing. So
yeah,
I'd love to
We've
hear
always been into the technical aspect of music. I have, at least. I'm always like, let's make it hard, let's make it technical. Like, I strive for that.
Well, John, Sean, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. It goes without saying, I'm a huge fan, and I'm hoping we can convert some of our awesome Zenescope listeners out there, get them to listen to Crozet.
Thank you so much, Mark. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, man. We appreciate it.
If you'd like to hear more from Crozet, hop on over to iTunes, Amazon Music, Pandora, and all of your favorite music outlets. You'll find Crozet's entire music catalog, from We'll Be Gone by Then to Running Time, their live album at Gradwell House, and of course, Suburbia. You can also check out more info about the band on crozet.bandcamp.com. Follow them on Instagram under Crozet Music all one word, as well as their YouTube channel, We Are Crozet. In addition to digital music, you can snag a copy of Suburbia on VHS as a super cool collectible from lunchmeatvhs.com. And I'm also told the album will be released in limited edition form on vinyl sometime within the coming month. For all of us here at Zenescope, that's a wrap on the September edition of Everything Zen. Very special thanks to Noah, Zenescope president and Baba Yaga creator, Joe Brusha, and our featured music guest, Crozet. I'm your host, Mark Sells. Thank you for listening. When fall comes, kicking summer out on its treacherous ass, as it always does, one day, sometime after the midpoint of September, it stays a while like an old friend that you have missed. It settles in the way an old friend will settle into your favorite chair, take out his pipe and light it, and then fill the afternoon with stories of places he has been and things he has done since he last saw you. From Salem's Lot by September birthday author Stephen King. So welcome to fall, old friends, and thank you for staying with us for a while. We'll see you all again next month right here on Everything Zen.